It says we are in live stream.
Cool.
We are going live on Facebook.
Neat.
Twitch.
Sweet.
You guys all ready to go?
I'm ready to go when you are.
We're streaming live.
Hey everybody, welcome back to SJGames Live. I'm Hunter and I'm here with Douglas Cole, who just recently launched today the Nordlond Bestiary enemies book. There's a better name for it. There's a longer name.
Nordland Bestiary is just right because no one
Okay.
can actually say Nordland or Oldlenboken.
Yes, okay, perfect. Didn't want to offend you on that one, but yeah, it is a bestiary and enemies book for the Nordland setting that you've created with Gaming Ballistic for Dungeon Fantasy. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. One of the things that, much like Delvers to Grow, my last project for the Dungeon Fantasy role-playing game, lets you get to the table quickly. There's nothing like a giant book of pre-written adversaries and enemies to make life a little easier for game masters. And, we're really the art team, yeah. So we are really trying to work hard to make it so that the game master and the players really know what they're staring at. Full color art for every creature.
Awesome. Yeah, so far it did launch on Kickstarter about 5 hours ago. It's already 200 backers, about $14,000. That's awesome. Getting closer to halfway. And it's going to be up for at least 19 days, right? Yeah, it looks
That's right. That's right. It's up until Pearl Harbor Day, actually, December 7th.
Hey, that's my birthday.
There you go.
There you go.
A day that will live in infamy. No, wait. So it runs for 19 days. The basic book shall be 128 pages. Originally, I was going to do a bunch of 48 pagers in order to, it's a hard industry but I eventually decided that it would just be better to go big.
Sure.
And not nickel and dime our way to glory. I wanted a big book. I'm hoping that backers want a big book. So it's going to start at 128 pages. But if we hit stretch goals at 66,000, which is double, we will be looking at a 240-page book.
Wow. Yeah, you mentioned the campaign's doing real well. You mentioned your Delvers to Grow campaign. That one did really well as well, funded. And are you surprised with the amount of people following the campaign? Are you excited?
So the number of followers when you launch a Kickstarter, you have a follow the campaign launch page, and SJGames is really good at getting that page up ahead of time. Me less so, since I'm the chief everything officer. But this time I was out in front. And at the moment I hit launch, there were 480 people following the campaign. There were 450 backers total by the end of the campaign on Delvers to Grow. So it looks to be about 25% stronger at least than Delvers to Grow. So we shall see. I really need it to be twice as strong to really have a shot at unlocking some of those good stretch goals.
Sure. But that's the point of having those good stretch goals. Hopefully we'll get that momentum and keep it going. Right. You've had a great start. It's a really good start for a campaign like that.
It is.
And we mentioned Delvers to Grow. We mentioned obviously the bestiary, but Nordland has been around for a while now. It's pretty much since the start of Dungeon Fantasy, and you've got tons of stuff that you've done in this setting. It's kind of been escalating. You start with like smaller adventures, then bigger books, and now we're to a potentially 200+ page book. How long is it taking you to build all this kind of stuff up and create a book this big, this massive? You mentioned you're the chief everything officer, but you have artists, I'm assuming, things like that.
Yes, no one wants to see me draw. Very few people want to see me sing, but nobody wants to see me draw. So Nordland started off. Nordland has a bit of a funny story to it, and I'll keep it short. But originally, someone said, "Hey, Dungeon Fantasy line, or Dungeon Fantasy role playing game, the product. Wouldn't it be cool to have kind of a Gonzo setting?" And someone posted, let it be known that King Krail has decided to open the wildlands, and we need mighty adventurers to clear it out, and keep what you kill. It was phrased in more noble language than that, but basically it was go north, kill monsters, and take their stuff. And at the time, I was like, wow, that would be a spectacular Dungeon Fantasy setting. But of course, Steve Jackson Games would never license that out because you don't do that at the time. So I wrote a lot of material in 5th edition D&D. And then Gen Con 50 happened, and the Dungeon Fantasy role-playing game came out, and I was a big supporter of that from the get-go. And while I was there, I went to Phil and Steve and said, hey, I've got a setting. I've got an adventure that I'm running here. I think it would be really great for the DFRPG, and I would love to provide third-party support for it. And Phil said, ask me later. Let's see how it does. And so I waited, and then I said, okay, it's later. I've got 3 Kickstarters under my belt. All of the core art is paid for. So how about we turn Lost Hall of Tyr into Hall of Judgment? And that became the first Kickstarter campaign. But in the meantime, Sean Punch had published Tavern Town, which I still think is the best example of how to write a open-ended town setting that exists in gaming. It is fantastic. Wow. And I use that as the model for what kind of information that I needed for the town setting for Hall of Judgment. And then I continued to do that and made my authors do that for books that came after. So Citadel at Nordvorn follows that pattern at least 3 times because there's multiple settlements in that book. Forest End, for its new settlement, Skogarenda, follows that pattern. Dragons of Rosgarth follows that pattern for Yarngarther. The Iron Garden, a town really built around smithing and weapon craft and armor steelworking. And even the new book by Peter Del Orto and Marshall Lapira, which is called The Crypt of Kreisevik, that has a town setting as well, and it follows the same pattern. What are the key things to do there? Who are the important people? What can you buy and sell? What about religion? What about festivals? Festivals are a great way to introduce a new party to a deep cultural setting. And all of these have a pretty much Nordic theme. You can see I'm dressed in my Viking gear. I've got my shield behind me. And part of that is because the Norse culture, for what we know of it, and that's an entirely different topic, because there were very few period right there sources that said what it was. The sagas of the Icelanders were written hundreds of years later, and the Eddas, same thing, later, right? So we don't have, it'd be like us saying we know everything about the Revolutionary War because it's about the same amount of time between when the stuff was written down. Anyway, point is that the legends of it, sort of the Disney version of Vikings, excuse me, has a lot to recommend it as a culture in which a party could go adventuring and people would look and say, why, yes, that's a legit career, right? Yeah, there's a show that I caught while I was sitting waiting for my tires to be changed. One of these not quite reality things, but close, called Gold Hunters. And it's a bunch of people looking for gold in Australia.
I've heard of that, yeah.
And so these guys are basically adventurers. I mean, they're not killing monsters and taking their stuff, but they're certainly looking for treasure that's lost. And, in the modern world, that's unusual, right? To do what they do. And sometimes they score and sometimes they go broke. But in a fantasy role-playing game setting, you really want the culture to say, well, yes, that is exactly what you do. And kind of the raiding, RAD, raid, the Viking culture where Viking is a verb to mean go out and raid, is a great background for that. And the dearth of actual written data on it allows you to take a lot of liberties with the setting. And so anyway, it seemed a natural place to jump off, and I've got a lot more in my head that could come later. There's a couple more towns, Akarisborg, which is so we've got Nordvorn, which is sort of the first city on the left. Actually, here we go. So here's a map. So we got Nordvorn up here, and we got a big old river, and here's Midgard and Yarngarder, but here on the other end is Akarisborg, the anchor city, and that's a big important port town in northern Minnesota. It's basically the Nordland version of Duluth. So if you've ever been to Duluth, it's a great little town actually. But so here's another thing. If you hold a map of Minnesota up to Nordland,
sure,
you'll be like, oh,
this is strikingly similar.
This is strikingly similar.
And the weather's similar too.
It is. And and the bad guys live in Canada, and Wisconsin has fallen into the sea. So we're all good here.
I think it's pretty accurate. Sounds right on bat.
Right,
one thing I did want to mention before we moved on, for anyone watching, feel free to ask questions at the end if we have a little time.
Please.
We should have a little time. We'll answer those, and I'll pitch them to Douglas, and we'll answer what we can. You kind of touched on what we're going to talk about next, or what question I had next was how big is this world? Like, we're seeing a lot of content, obviously, in the Nordland world, but how much more do you have already, and do you have like an idea of where you're aiming?
I'm gonna keep this one up until people really get tired of it, and hopefully that's not for a long time. But there's a lot going on in the setting, and as an example, there are already worlds, I guess, or realms that aren't just the Viking area. We've got in Nordlander folk, the cat folk example come from totally not ancient Egypt, and there's already been some references to other totally not X, right? To the south, there's Arnulf and Brionu. Brionu is totally not Gaelic or Celtic influenced. Arnulf is totally not Carolingian France, which has a lot in common with the Viking culture. Then you go a little farther south, and there's a unique culture called no, that's not it. What's it called? Anyway, there's a culture down there, the Thief Kingdom. It's called the Thief Kingdom of
Thieves.
Yeah, something like that. I can't remember. But anyway, so Barrackfell is the dwarf home, and then there's Inthriki, which is kind of your horse nomad area. And I was reading a collection of unmitigated pretentiousness, ACOUP, and I really would like to detail out the Niveri, not the Inthriki, sorry, Niveri, the Niveri nomads. I really want them to come to life in a way that is not stupid Dothraki.
Sure.
Right, because the Dothraki are supposedly based on there's nothing resembling actual horse nomad peoples in that at all, pretty much. And I'm quoting somebody who is a scholar of such things, who basically said, yeah, nobody lives like this, right, and nobody can live like this. So it would be awfully nice to have a robust culture of horse nomads and archers and stuff that would be another setting. And there's Morvel, which is totally not Macedonian Greece. Inthriki is totally not Kamakura era Japan. And who knows what else is out there. The lore of Kamakura era Japan had a lot to do with China and Korea and wars and breaking away and where the influences were, and borrowing these these historical touch points. Well, first of all, history is way weirder than anything that anyone can ever come up with, right? oh, and we were doing this, and there was an invasion, and then all of a sudden, all the volcanoes blew up. And if you were writing this as a plot, your editor would say, no effing way. Just cut that because it's stupid, except it's history. This really happened. It's like looking at a map of Nordland. If you've ever seen the cartographer critique of Nordland, they're like, yeah, no, this you're fired. This is not a real city. Well, except it is. And so you get a lot of that stuff. Oh, let's do a city where everyone gets around in canals and the whole thing is sinking. Well, it's Venice, right? And that had an incredibly rich cultural history that the GURPS line and the Dungeon Fantasy line covers quite well. In any case, there's and Matt Rigsby does a lot of stuff with Venice and all of the intrigue and politicking and dueling in the culture there. And it's a fascinating area, and it's easy to import that kind of thing into different places. And I would love to bit by bit to blow out that world. I could be writing in Nordland, or Eterra is what I call the overall world. Like I could be writing in that for years easily.
Okay, that's kind of what I was getting at. It felt like we're seeing the tip of an iceberg, and that there's a lot more there, especially since this is at base on funding. We're at 128 pages in hardback, which is already big. And so if you're able to unlock all the stretch goals, 240, that's a lot of content just here.
It's a big book, and I'm looking forward to it. Having a book of monsters like that really enables a great deal. I have been a fan and a player of GURPS since 1989, when I was first introduced to it. I started play on the 3rd edition revised, and I've been doing that ever since. The depth of tactical play has always been great. The ability to just pull a prepared module off the shelf has always been limited by the fact that GURPS by itself is a toolbox rather than a game, right? If you pull the fantasy trip off the shelf, it's set in Seedry, and you have a vague amount of culture. You can put almost anything there, but as an example, there are no gods no real gods, manifest gods in Seedry. There's some hand waving at the Minoran, but nobody ever talks about those, except in whispers of a nameless fear. So you can write in that because you understand it. But when it's sort of every campaign for themselves, it's hard to do. So the nice thing about Nordland is that I can take, say, ideas of monsters that have compiled for some other game that starts with like Funyuns and Dungeons or some Funyuns and Dagons or something, and say, oh look, if you here's an Etterkop, which interestingly enough I recently learned is Danish for spider, and it's a bipedal spider creature. I had forwarded you a character sheet that you could put up there if you would.
Let me see if we can't share that.
But I'll keep talking because that's what I do. But yeah, so to do that, you can pull a something off the shelf and you open it up, and some monsters are already there. Skeletons or stuff are in the Monsters 1. They're in the box set. Hill giants are in Monsters 2. But the Etterkop, not so much. And so if you want to go after that, then you need to go after that. And it'd be nice to not have to stop play to create a monster. And that's what a proper bestiary does. And the nice thing is when you tie it loosely to a setting, you can start to create legends and stories and powers that make sense within the cosmology of that setting. And that's what I've done for the monsters in the bestiary that's being produced right now. There's a lot in there. There's some NPCs. There are going to be some powerful, I don't want to say bad guys, let's call them rivals, because one of the things that we'll do for the more powerful creatures is to make sure that everyone's the hero of their own story. I'm sure that some of our horrible people throughout history thought that they were the hero of their own story, even though they're vilified now. They believe that they had earned or deserved what they were trying to take by force or kill people to get or whatever. So, there's going to be some more people like the operative from the Serenity movie, who are willing to do anything to get what they want. Although he was a little bit too self-aware of his evilness. Sometimes it's more fun when you have a powerful actor that is morally gray and the players can interact with that, and maybe they become henchmen or maybe they decide to oppose them, and either way can work. And so I don't want to drop down some of these guys and be of course then you have the cult fanatic, which is just a scenery chewing evil thing. And so everyone needs cultists. They're like the Nazis of the cinema world. You never feel bad when you have to kill them.
Yeah. Oh, just a heads up. For some reason, our screen sharing over here doesn't work through the streaming thing that we're doing.
Okay, let me see if I can do it.
Yeah, see if you can drop one in if you'd like.
You need to enable me here.
Okay, let's see if we can do that. One moment, folks. Sorry about that.
Yeah, you bet.
Let's see.
Go away.
It's the host. That would be Brandon.
Okay.
He'll
let me here. Yeah, here's an editor cop. Let me see what you do.
Let's see if
there we go. No, not yet. Anyway, so let's we can see if we can work that in the background, and then
yeah, we'll see what's up.
Keep entertaining people.
Sorry, folks. We're looking for that setting. Anyway, continuing on that, I kind of in that same realm. Let me pull my settings back up here.
Guide, yep.
See if I can... Oh, now it should be working.
All right, let's try it. Yay.
There we go.
Can you see me?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Can you see the?
Well, we can see the. Yeah, we can see us on the side there.
Okay, and you can see the creature.
Oh yeah.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
So this is the Etterkop, and this is an example of the layout. It's kind of tentative because I threw it together this morning as an example of what it's going to be, but the graphic design is going to hold true. So you've got its origin. It's got a description. Where do they hang out? How do they fight? And how do they live? And what do they eat? And then it's got some special abilities, traits and skills. That's a very limited list for now, but I think it's going to grow. And then a stat block, which is mostly populated and needs some work. But you can see the art, and next to every monster that isn't obviously already a human is Ilva. And Ilva, the silhouette there, is 5'9", barbarian warrior with a shield on her back and a long sword at her hip, or really a knightly sword at her hip. And so every creature, big or small, will have a scale like that. Like for example, here is Hawk and some raptors. Got a lot of these, but you can sort of see that we've got Ilva next to a goshawk and a peregrine falcon. And you've got the main stats for the hawk, and then the falcon can be different sizes, and the falcons have acrobatics at dex +2, but the rest is the same. And you'll see stuff like that for different creature variants. One of the things that Sean Punch and I went back and forth on, although I don't have any examples of it just yet, is I've got a whole bunch of different horses. Draft horse, riding horse, war horse, cavalry horse, mule. I think I've got a donkey, reindeer because they were in Citadel at Nordlond, and rules for kind of build a horse in order to let people customize their horse and how much are they worth. And you can get a horse or a donkey for not that much, or you can pay the equivalent of $75,000 or $100,000 for the Audi R8 or Tesla S of horses, because and that was based on research where you saw as much as a factor of 25 to 75 to 100 price increase for super highly trained war mounts for the nobility, and there was a line of people who would be willing to basically shell out the equivalent of 75 or 100 or $125,000 for a war trained mount, because any advantage in combat would do. But like here's a great example in the upper left here of the Eismark Fedler, which, don't worry, is called the Ice Centipede, and it's totally not a Remmerhaz from that other game. And you've it's so that's this one's a little bit crude just because I plucked it out of a hey, is this okay? And I'm like, that's beautiful. But there was some background that was there. But we've got a Vang Ormer, a winged worm, which can take a chomp at this little guy here, right? Here's the Hoff Ormer, the sea serpent. All of these.
So this is all stuff that hasn't even been revealed yet.
That's correct. Everything on this is new. Actually, the Vang Ormer makes an appearance in the Kickstarter page.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. But here's we got the green hag here, casting a glamour of a drowning woman to lure people close so that she can grab them. The green hag here is modeled after Meg Knucklebones from the movie Legend. Here's the cult fanatic that I mentioned, animated armor. I want to zoom in on this because this is a new gentleman. This is a new artist for me. And he loves his detail. Look at that.
Oh, wow.
Look at that. And this is a very low resolution image that I've blown up to, but he loves his detail.
Looks great.
No, I am deliriously happy with the quality of the art that I'm getting. You've got, I don't want to do that. That's not what I meant to do. No.
Except for that art.
Except for that. Yeah, you stop that. No, make it stop.
Well.
All right, stop it. Here, we'll do this. File, open recent, artboard. I don't know why this is doing that, but this is really annoying.
It's decided.
It has. It's messing me up. All right, make it go away, and we'll bring it back. File, open recent, artboard. Thank you.
There we go.
Keep my cursor away. Anyway, the insect guy down here is another. It's called the Bana Dirith, which is it's a bone demon. But it's probably going to change the name because it's one of these things where I described it to the artist and he came back and I'm like, that's better than what I said. So I'm going to rewrite the creature to match what he drew. And then the 5 black and white images, one of them you've seen before. If you're a backer of my TFT project, this is one of the wizards from the Character Collection 4 Wizards. And we're going to give her a backstory and she'll be colored, and she's going to be one of these gray area characters. Here is a totally not an invisible stalker, a form of air elemental that is summoned to the realm of Midgard, not always for evil intent, but always for lethal intent. If you've got a stalker coming after you, somebody's going to die. And then we've got a Grendelkin, a form of troll, and 2 different degenerate dragons. When the magic ley lines of Nordland were broken, a lot of things that required magic to live and thrive stopped thriving and got weird. And so that happened to a lot of the dragons that when the Dragon Empire ended. We used a combination of Microscope and some other world building game that I can't remember. This is years ago, to create like a 10,000 year history of Iterra.
Wow.
To understand why it was the way it is and stuff like that. And then you'll see some old favorites like the Valkyrie from the last page of Hand of Asgard, and here you see something that is going to appear in all the stats. But I've been playing around with layout as one does, and I like the table presentation, but it'll be alternate stripes, and that should allow you to do what you need to do. And then there's there's this, which is I've already talked to a very well-known, reputable printer of cards that happens to live a half an hour from me. And they I think they used to do the cards for Fantasy Flight. And they have license
I
to
know
do
what
it.
company you're talking about.
Yep. So this is anyway, one of their standard cards happens to be a quarter page of the standard 8x10 format. And so what I've done here is created a card that has the art on the back, and a condensed stat block on the front, that you can put up in a little standee. Like here's, I think these little standees, they clamp 100%, if you can see sort of right there in the middle. And so you stick the card in there, and your players can see the art, and the game master can see the stats.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. And if you need bases, folks, we sell those.
Yeah.
We have packs of those.
That's right. And then the other bit is the way that the PDF is going to be formatted, because there is a PDF version of this, especially for the international people, because I can't ship the cards out of the US affordably and predictably.
Sure.
It starts triggering value-added tax, and shipping of not books outside the US is vaguely insane right now. And
It's
likely
brutal.
to continue. It's brutal. And I know that people are tired. I mean, frack, man, we're all tired of hearing it. We're tired of living it, but it is the way it is. And we got to be able to make the next game and not go broke on this one. But these are print and play. The PDF is going to be formatted 10 inches tall and 4 inches wide. So you'll be able to print 2 monsters per page, cut them out, and fold them over, and stand them on your desk if you can't get the cards from an international perspective. If you get the cards, the PDF comes with it.
Awesome. That's great value. So you showed us quite a few preview things. A lot of this stuff wasn't on the campaign yet, so you guys can get an idea of some upcoming things. And obviously check the campaign out. We've already gained a few backers during the interview here. It looks like we're up to 208. So that's awesome.
Excellent.
It's really cool to see people backing it. We did have a few questions come in. Before we got to Q&A, did you have anything else you wanted to say, specifically upcoming stuff, things like that in the campaign?
Not just yet. I'm really looking forward to the weekend. Thursday launch campaigns tend to do reasonably well on Friday as well, as people open up their Kickstarter pages as the weekend turns. We seem to be approaching 50%, which is excellent. But I would encourage people to share this widely, because obviously it's good for me, but I really, really, really want that 240-page book, and not just because yay business. I just think that we've earned a big book of monsters. We've been fans of this game for a long time, and darn it, we want it, and I want it. I'm making this for me as much as for everybody, so that I can play with it too. These monsters are portable. There's going to be a name index, so that there will be common names, as well as I actually suspect that because of the way that it works, I'm going to need to slap the OGL license in the back, because I'm definitely going to name drop everything in the SRD, so that if you pull module B2 and want to find something from it, you will probably be able to, because there's no question that this concept started life as a giant book of material, and I rewrote all of the background text, but the concept of a lot of these guys is either from that other game or from folklore, which
awesome,
right? So you really ought to be able to grab a wealth of materials from other games and run them with no prep. And between Delvers to Grow and the Bestiary, we really ought to be able to say, hey, here's this cool game called GURPS. Oh, really? What do you do? Well, we're sort of a Game of Thrones or a Wheel of Time or a Conan the Barbarian thing, or the TV show Vikings, which was another viral thing that went out, right? So that's stuff that zillions of people have watched and enjoyed. And oh, it's a lot like that. Oh, okay, let's play. Okay, well, instead of coming back in a week or two or many hours later of character generation, you break open Delvers to Grow with either the GCS or GCA support, GURPS Character Sheet or GURPS Character Assistant, and 3 to 6 minutes later, you can have a fully functional, playable character that isn't really missing much at point levels from starting at 62 to 250, basically from between like first and eighth level in like a fifth edition setting. And then you grab a game and you start playing. And if you need a monster, you flip to page 38 or 142 or whatever. Hopefully, you're going to flip to page 240. Well, probably 238 because you got a couple pages of indices and stuff. But in any case, I'm really hoping that this becomes a resource that broadens the appeal of a game that I love to write for and I love to play. And I think it's something that should be very useful for folks.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great utility and entry. The Delvers to Grow is the entry point. This is a great utility to kind of add on to that.
That's correct.
I agree with all that. One moment, we got a few questions that came in. If you don't mind, we can hang in here and do a little bit of Q&A.
Yeah,
just pulling those up now. And there we go. Oh, we have quite a few that just popped up. Well, we had a couple comments too. Rory said that scale shadow is a great idea. I'm assuming he's talking about the scale shadow from the bestiary there, the comparison there. Let's see. Paraj Manjakar. He noticed the similarities to Minnesota. His wife's a native of Maplewood. And they're swimming in Wisconsin, which I did see that. Yeah, that stuff. He also did a question. Have you considered writing a compiled campaign world book at some point just to pull all the campaign world stuff into one place?
I have considered that. It's a big topic. And yeah, no, I have considered it. And if nothing else, it would allow people who might want to write their own adventures for me to have a system Bible or a setting Bible, I should say, that would mean that people don't have to own everything and read everything to get to that. I've toyed with that as a wiki as well. But a setting book I think would be really interesting. I sometimes question whether or not people would be interested in the lore. A lot of people have their own campaigns. And so you don't want to tie things so hard to the world that your material is not portable. But hey, if people are asking for a system book, there's utility to it as well.
Sure. It could. The way I see system books personally is when you are going like step 1.5. You're starting a campaign, but you don't necessarily know how to make a campaign. It's a good way to kind of start one out.
Yeah.
Let's see. Praj had another one here. Table presentation. I'm assuming the tables on the stat blocks, underneath the stat blocks. Table presentation to have multiple attack modes, right?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
Like swing and thrust are there with different damage lines. This was a little bit. The best place to see what I'm probably going to wind up doing with a slightly different color scheme is Forest's End. The book has. Actually, Hall of Judgment had tabular presentation of attack lines as well. It's a little more space intensive, and I want to make sure that I can showcase the art. But yeah, I asked around, and the tabular presentation wins.
Sure.
So yeah, I'll be doing that. It was a little crude in the example that I showed, but yeah.
Cool. We did have a couple things from Paul Pappas as well.
Yeah.
First one is, how do you decide how much material to offer as stretch goals? What do you do with the material if the stretch goal is not met?
Sarcastic answer, I burn it and never look at it again, delete the file and salt the earth. No, so originally I was going to do 48-page volumes with roughly 40 monsters, 50 monsters a piece, and it's hard to make a monster count because sometimes, like on the raptors, on the small birds, they you could have like 5 or 6 or 8 different types on
Sure.
one page. But I was going to do that, but I really wanted to allow the book to grow.
Mhm.
But one has to be realistic about these things. I've never had a Kickstarter with more than 600 or 620 backers. And in order to do a 250-page book, I need well more than 1,000. Now that I've got the cards and the other table aids, it drops down. But I still think I'm going to need to hit 1,000 backers, and honestly, 1,400 would be better to do that. So you start to need a response on the order of the original Dungeon Fantasy role playing game Kickstarter, 1,587 people. In order to do that. And I didn't see a good way of scaling. Originally, I had this campaign structure where I was like, all right, well, the PDF will grow. So you're going to get in for $20 or $25, and the PDF grows, but everyone will add books at an adjusted price in backer kit. I'm like, well, that's a horrible thing.
It's tough to coordinate.
That would be tough. I've done stuff like that before.
So
but
have we.
Nobody enjoyed it, right? So then I was like, all right, well, why don't I just take a risk? What book can I stage where the introductory PDF and print plus PDF are reasonable at the intro and a good deal, but not a bankruptcy deal at the full book. And that's where I settled on it. I will admit, the PDF is a little more expensive because of the art content. And when you make a book, some people know this, some people don't. When you make a book, the PDF comes first. And when you send a book to the printer, it's a PDF, and most of the cost, even when you're considering large print runs, most of the cost of a project is getting to that PDF stage. And some estimates of this particular project, almost 80% of my total project cost before I get to printing would have been art.
I think that's gotten a little muddled recently, especially where a lot of people, it's like a physical book. Why don't you just throw in the PDF? It's because it's expensive. It's a product that we made, right. And it's a lot of the price goes into that. The art, the writers, if you were hiring writers, things like that, or
paying myself, right? I got to eat
exactly.
too. But more seriously, I did shift things around a little bit. So ultimately, if we hit a couple of stretch goals, the PDF is going to look pretty reasonable, and the hardback is going to start to look like a really good deal. And if we hit 240 pages, the retail on those would be well over $100 sold separately. And so the $65 pledge will start to look good. But in any case, I decided to go big. I wanted to take a risk towards the end of this my first year as a full-time publisher, where I don't have a day job, right? This is it. So I wanted to go big, and people have been talking about a bestiary for Dungeon Fantasy Bestiary for the Dungeon Fantasy role-playing game for a long time. And the difficulty there was always, but what campaign, but what setting? How do we ground these things so it's not just a hodgepodge of crap? But Nordland does that, and it allows that. But they're also, you don't need to work so hard to take a falcon and move it to any world. Yeah. Right. You don't, and even you can rebrand. I mean, my Nord Elves are goblins, hobgoblins, hobs are bugbears, right? I mean, these are all monsters. Orcs are actually were not in the dungeon in the Nordland setting until Kyle put them there, called Jotun, the runt giants. So orcs are actually degenerate giants that spun off after a prior Ragnarok event when the dragons kicked the giants' butt out of Jotunheim, and the rest of them came down to Midgard, where they wilted and ceased to thrive. In any case, the thing is, I decided to go big, and 128 pages makes a nice hardback, and 240 pages makes a really nice hardback. So
Yeah,
that's kind of how I decided.
for the last part where he said what happens to stretch goal assignment, I don't know how you personally do it, but I know in people we've gotten that question on other campaigns before, you know, Munchkin campaign, Skirps campaigns, things like that. Like what happens if it doesn't vaporize? The ideas are usually still there. Maybe even some work's already started on those types of things, or some's been completed. It just isn't feasible for us to print a book or print cards. All that goes to costs. So if we can't afford to do it, we won't do it. But the ideas are still there. Maybe they'll end up in another project down the road. Maybe there's an expansion or another book that comes later, things like that.
That's right. And so if the market says, you know, we're really interested in a 128 page or 144 page book, fine, so be it. That'll be what it is. And the other extra 100 creatures or thereabouts, all those stats will still exist, and I will work on them, and I will have them in my spreadsheet. And my Patreon will fund the art monster by monster until I've got enough to compile into volume 2.
Yeah, there you go. And plus, you'll have you have a reason to go to the Patreon as well too, because maybe there'd be stuff there.
Indeed.
And one last quick one, Paul Pappas again, it kind of related to similar. It is in a stretch goal this size. Is it already or mostly completed before you can offer it? So like, is the work done before it's posted?
In this particular case, so this is actually an unusual Kickstarter for me, because mostly when I do these projects, I have the pre-work mostly done, and then as soon as the art is done, I'm into PDF, and then it's in your hands. This is going to take longer. It is a lot of detail work. Every monster has many stats. The reason I'm doing in this spreadsheet is because my old way of doing them led to too many mistakes. Now I'm using some more sophisticated techniques because I'm better at it. And by doing it in a spreadsheet, it means that I can output directly to layout, which is pretty slick, and then tweak it around a little bit. And then there it is. But I'm sorry, what was let me get to the point here. I think I've had too much coffee today. What was the question again?
Is it just, is the stretch goal mostly like a completed thing that you're posting, or is it like once it's unlocked, then the work begins?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. I guess what I would say is I'm working from when I wake up, well, after breakfast, after I get my kids to school, to the end of the day, every day, doing basically spreadsheet stuff, at least when I'm not making graphical presentations for Kickstarters and shows. But every day is more spreadsheet. And when I get to the 128 page, I will keep going. During the campaign, I'm only going to fund the art that is unlocked.
Sure.
And some of the art you'll have seen before. Some of it is brand new. For animals, I will probably use photorealistic conversion of public domain pictures, and use filters to make them consistent in style with the illustration that my art team is doing. If we really bust through stretch goals, I get to stop doing that and spend some money to have custom illustrations for that sort of thing. But everyone kind of knows what a bear looks like, and so I think the unusual creatures where you need visualization to help understand just how deeply screwed you are when you're facing something that's really big or unusual, is where I think that people will want me to spend the art budget first.
Sure, that makes sense. Also, I think that covers all the questions we had. I want to thank everybody for watching, asking questions. Really appreciate that. We've gotten a few more backers during the campaign, or during the interview for the campaign. Douglas, thank you for joining us for this.
Anytime.
Do you have anything else you want to plug at the end here?
No, I mean, this is, I guess what I'd say is, this is obviously a big campaign for me. I hope it's a big campaign for all the backers. The most important thing in a campaign like this is the network effect. So make comments, nice ones ideally, but that'd be whatever. Comments on the Kickstarter page. Hit up Reddit. There's 9,000 users on the GURPS Reddit page, or close to it. It doesn't take too many of those people to come by before this becomes the full book that we all want. And so you can't neglect those network effects. And it's always better for someone to say, hey, I think this would be awesome if people backed it, if that person is not me. Everyone is tired of authors shilling their stuff. But if you've liked what you've seen and you want to see more of it, if you want to see a 240-page hardback, little kind word goes a long way.
Yeah, spread the word, especially if you're interested in getting more Nordlond. This is the way to do it. Get the word out. Well, thank you all for joining us. Really appreciate you coming on, Douglas. Good luck for the rest of the campaign. You'll be seeing some more posts about that on the Daily Illuminator, share on social media throughout the holidays. We've got Thanksgiving coming up too. So hope you guys all have a great week. We are not streaming next week because of Thanksgiving. There is a cool Black Friday item dropping. You'll get more info about that next week. Hint, it's on screen right now. We'll see you next week. See you later, Doug.
Thank you very much.